So thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me here. Like Takashi said, I'm currently working at the University of Oulu in Finland, and here in Japan, I'm visiting the East Lab at the University of Tokyo. But originally, I'm from a small city, or back then it wasn't even a city, it was still a village called Nivala in Finland. And I thought it's important to mention this because it's kind of important to talk about your roots always. So Nivala is a cool place, and it looks like this, which is fairly different than Tokyo. So I grew up there somewhere, roaming those kind of fields, and kind of my super skill still to these days, I like to say that I can milk a cow with my bare hands because I grew up on a farm. So I guess that's a good place to spring from and then end up working somewhere like in Tokyo for quite a while. So you get to see different places in the world. University of Oulu is known for 6G. There's a lot of XR research these days. And of course, just like pretty much everyone else, they work a lot on AI these days as well. But Oulu as a city itself is perhaps in Japan most known for the air guitar world championships that are there every year. And there is a lady called Nanami Nagura who has won it at least 4 times. So there's a lot of Japanese contestants always who travel to Oulu for air guitar world championships. And then Nokia used to be one of these really big factories in Finland. Nokia, the cell phone manufacturer, and Oulu used to have 3 or 4 big Nokia plants. And then because Oulu is basically home for a lot of wireless technologies as well. So, for example, the first GSM call in the world was placed in Oulu, Finland. But then when Nokia there was a downfall of Nokia some maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So Oulu went through a big renovate or this kind of a transition period from just being a city with wireless technologies into a lot of different SMEs. So now we have hundreds of SMEs and tight collaboration with the university and those little companies in Oulu. So that's basically where I'm hailing from. And what we also do in Oulu is we've been working a lot with different concepts and thinking around crowdsourcing. And with that said, this talk will be not just rethinking data origins, but I kind of just gave this topic because I wasn't quite sure what I want to talk about. And then I ended up rethinking my past life for this talk quite a bit. So I also am really thankful for this opportunity to rethink what we've been doing for the past 15 years. And that's always one of the nice things about talks like this, because you get to reflect on your own past. With that said, I had a look at some of the previous TrustML talks, and they are very algorithm and machine learning and math heavy. My talk will be very humans heavy. So there's not going to be very complicated formula here. There's not going to be a lot of complicated results. I'm literally just going on a historical trip of what we have been doing at the University of Oulu with crowdsourcing and this kind of human-centric data management practices, how to collect data. How do we see crowdsourcing and labor markets beyond what they are really being used for in the machine learning and AI industry, which basically is data enrichment and data labeling and those kind of parallelizable tasks. So before I head back 15 years, I want to head back a bit more. So 1770 is when this machine was first revealed. And this is a kind of a nice little historical machine with a human inside called the Turk. In Hungary, there's an author, Wolfgang von Kempelen, who built this thing to, well, of course, to impress a woman. So they built this kind of a mechanical automaton, which was skilled by a super skilled human chess player. And they toured the world for decades with this, beating such players like Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin. And there's a really great story here that, for example, when they played against Napoleon Bonaparte, the Napoleon tried to cheat. So they made an illegal move. And this machine like turned its head and said, you can't do that, and kind of corrected the mistake. Now, this is, of course, a nice little kind of similar thing as we can see crowdsourcing. So if this thing was touring the world as a machine with human inside and kind of hoaxing and cheating a lot of people that this is an intelligent machine, we now have this big machine online, which is the crowdsourcing and labor marketplaces, which we kind of see them as a machine. We see them as programmable interfaces, sometimes forgetting that there is a real human inside. So the way that I want to talk about it is that it's a big machine with human inside, and it is indeed big, big. So if we think of how many people are now accessible through different kind of APIs or self-serve, point and click platforms, we're talking about millions of people. In the US, lately, more than one third of the US workforce is engaged in some form of gig work. So if you think of people doing gig work through online interfaces in one way or another, that's a lot of people. And NASA, for example, is using 32 different crowd platforms and accessing 120 million gig workers through those if they want. So we're really talking about a lot of people who are more or less, of course, not all are directly accessible with these crowdsourcing platforms, but through similar kind of model. So we have workers who are many times rather faceless. They might be represented by numbers in many platforms. Sometimes they are just represented by nicknames, so you don't really form any kind of relationships with the workers. And then you have this computer machine in the middle, and then you have the requesters who are asking for work. And specifically in the case of crowdsourcing, it's sometimes very, very programmatic as well. So you can use literally APIs to access this kind of bunch of humans online for whatever kind of work you want. And it doesn't have to only be data labeling, because these people are capable of doing a lot more other types of work than just machine learning purposes or data enrichment. There's a lot of very diverse and educated people, more and more in many of these platforms. Now, of course, historically, it's because these machine learning and AI solutions are really data hungry. So I was talking with one of these platform owners a couple of years ago, and they, for example, were building an application where they wanted to build like a mobile phone solution that allows you to just take a picture of your feet, and they would send you shoes of the correct size. And they needed a lot of training data for that. So in just a couple of weeks, they were able to get over 50,000 15 to 20-second video clips of people's feet and their shoe sizes, so that they were able to build like an AI solution which sends you correct sized shoes by just you taking a video of your feet. Now, for example, in Japan, I can't find big enough shoes almost ever because my feet are big, and the ABC stores here only cater up to European Union size 44. Mine are 46. So I always have to order my shoes from Amazon, and I always end up ordering the wrong size of shoes. So these solutions are actually real world very useful, but you have to imagine how much data we need to build these solutions. So that's why these platforms initially were, of course, created. So we have these standardized tasks with maximum scale and speed in mind. These platforms often work in like a self-serve way. So you have image classification, boundary boxes, selecting a region in images, video moderation, all kinds of these kind of tasks that are needed at really, really high scalability levels and maximum speeds. And then if we start to look deeper, what actually is going on in these platforms, this suddenly becomes interesting. 18 plus violent content or spam. I mean, spam is quite innocent, even though it's annoying. But then if we think that we have people, we have thousands, tens of thousands of people doing something like video content moderation with payments like $4.5 for 1,000 tasks. Uh, there's a lot of these kind of news articles which sometimes fly under the radar because all the hype goes into, the newest OpenAI model or things like that. But these things are not born out of thin air. So someone needs to be labeling data, including the nasty data that shouldn't be fed into these machines or, for example, shown online. So this moderating work, content moderator work, or even, yes, training these large language models, which are so popular these days, to be something that we can present to the general public. So OpenAI, for example, was caught using Kenyan workers paying less than $2 per hour to literally just read the most horrible stuff you can possibly find online, including real stories and whatever poisonous text that you probably don't want to read yourself. So you can understand how this raises pretty serious ethical concerns, especially when then these machines are just happily used in countries where we sometimes sort of pretend that, okay, now we are completely on safe ethical grounds and paying our dues. Is the audio still working? This is, by the way, saying not hearing anything. Turn up volume. I guess it is. Okay, so the price for doing this kind of work is pretty minimal. Might be $4.5 for 1,000 tasks, which is probably something that you want to get paid a little bit more for moderating toxic content. These platforms are also ridden with all kinds of other problems. So there's just non-existing healthcare, no psychological support for the workers, of course, no labor unions, no support structures, no workplace benefits. And if you think of this as someone's work and you can get booted algorithmically without basically doing anything, not even doing anything necessarily wrong, there is no human oversight in these processes. So it becomes to like you kind of start to realize how unfair these platforms can be for the workers. And this kind of seeing the human behind the APIs and behind the big machine is yes, it opens up this kind of nasty Pandora's box that, okay, there's a lot of issues on these platforms that need to be dealt with. But it's also quite undeniable that there is a pretty cool opportunity right now. Because the concept of trapping human cognition behind some kind of programmable interface, aka crowdsourcing or human computation at scale, and also these existing platforms that are built there because of the data hungry machine learning and AI companies, it offers a really cool opportunity to start exploring what else can we do with these platforms. So over the past 15 years, what we have been doing is we've been putting the concept itself into different kinds of uses. We've been studying these labor markets. We've been building new labor markets for ourselves, new crowdsourcing platforms, and then we've been repurposing pretty successfully these existing crowdsourcing marketplaces for purposes such as health and well-being applications and digital health solutions in general. Couple of historical pieces that we've been doing, for example, is like building our own situated crowdsourcing platforms. So we've been hosting tens and tens of different kinds of interactive digital screens all over the place in Oulu mostly, but also in some collaborator universities where we have been studying like people's motivation, like if we do physical crowdsourcing, really context situated. Like, for example, if you want to do crowdsourcing on a university campus to understand something about that campus or the population there on the campus, we cannot use existing marketplaces like Mechanical Turk or anything else for those. So we need to build our own platforms. And this kind of serendipitous work is a really nice opportunity to tap into human cognition without necessarily even paying people, because people are sometimes bored and they just want to do stuff. That's why you see everyone these days looking at their mobile phones, even though they should be looking in front of them when they're walking on the campus. But you can use public displays to make them do some kind of useful work at the same time. And for example, what we found there is the little graph. Well, I would not suggest try to parse what is going on in the plots, but stuff like if there is no motivational like if there's no motivational reasons presented to people like why you should engage with this work, they will not do a good job and they will just spend less time with that work. So little psychological tricks like simply just offering people better motivation to use the 10 years we hosted like a big network of public displays in downtown Oulu and also indoor areas where we had hundreds of thousands of on these displays. I wonder if I can kill that. Yes. So we've been hosting this kind of a big crowdsourcing networks also in Oulu. And then once we got sort of, I wouldn't say fed up with that, but once we graduated from doing that, because it's just fun to change topics every now and then, we went to mobile. So I've been building this kind of mobile sourcing tool for different purposes as well. And for example, studying what kind of stop, or for example, what is suitable on smart speakers. So back in the days, Amazon launched this Amazon Echo device, and now there are other smart speakers as well. So maybe we can have a different kind of labor that can be done via sound only. So there's different kind of tasks that can be routed to these kind of people. And then finally, recently we have been using these online platforms a lot, and I wanted to include this picture. This is where we tried to see which of these platforms are great for creative work instead of just labeling data or data enrichment. And the picture is, we had a doctoral defense of Dr. Jonas Oppenlander, and it was during the pandemic, so I was sitting alone in a lecture hall where everyone else was remote, and that was quite funny. And the reason why this pandemic era memory is here is because we've also been studying that. So how, for example, this kind of global events such as the pandemic, how do they affect the labor markets at large online? So what happens when a pandemic strike is, of course, some people lose their jobs, but many other people just stay home and they have more and more time to work on these platforms. But also employers must kind of find new ways to get some work done. So the pandemic actually made a lot of employers deploy more tasks on these marketplaces. So these global events also have an effect on these labor markets. So then this kind of long historical arc of research on the concept itself led us to think of something else than just labor markets, because the labor market, it has a cold ring to it. Like, just you buy labor and you kind of forget the human who is actually producing the labor. So since these kind of fundamental arc of research on crowdsourcing, we have been trying to think of a bit more human-centric way to build services, still relying on the concept of crowdsourcing and this unbelievable source of data that we have. So 3 layers of work that our group has been working on is this data management. So how do we enable human-centric data management so that when we crowdsource whatever, even like personal health data or something rather sensitive, we would be able to manage it somewhere outside the silos of big tech, and we have full control of the data, and we can, for example, allow for payments for the end users for their data. And then, of course, we keep on working on different crowdsourcing tools to capture this data more efficiently, and then figuring out what kind of end user applications. I call it canned intelligence. Like, when we finally get to can that intelligence somewhere, how can we repurpose that to build some kind of practical applications? So I'm just going to go through these all 3 layers again through examples of what we have been doing. So data, and we work a lot with digital health solutions. So we kind of look at this kind of personal health data many times. And human-centric data management in this like little silo, for us, it means that we're trying to offer people better incentives than just paying them once for their data, through them having control to their own data and, for example, being able to auction away their data for the highest bidder, or getting paid by reusing their data. So if you think of data, it's infinitely replicable. Like, your mobile phone produces so much data about you, or whatever data you might have about you, that if you are the controller and owner of that data, you can just replicate it and sell it to people if such a mechanism would exist. Now, what is happening currently is that all the big corporations who own your data or control your data, they are selling it forward to the advertisers. And you, who produce the data, you're not really benefiting it, other than, of course, the same big companies are offering their services for you kind of for free. But, again, you're paying through your own data for those services, and they're making a lot more money than they're offering to you. That's just how the current model works. So there's, for example, this My Data push, which is originally, I think probably 10, or I can't remember the year, maybe 20 years ago, originated from Finland, but now it's still really? Okay. Yes, nice. Okay, so we have somebody in the room who knows better than I. Very nice. So it originated, it's now a EU-led push that is trying to help companies and individuals to better manage their data. And it was first more toward end users, but now it's more toward companies, because, of course, they are also, even though they're nonprofit, they're trying to find a sustainable model. So we have been working with this My Data idea and kind of looking into people's perceptions of what is fair, what is ethical, what is fair value for their health data. We've been using this kind of mobile crowdsourcing toolkits to collect that data and then see for what kind of purposes would people be willing to reuse their data, for instance. And then we're also looking at different kind of cultural differences in these kind of crowdsourced data sets. So for example, we're building AI-based privacy solutions that would, for example, be able to obfuscate or warn people across different cultures, like where can you share stuff online? And we're looking at how to store these kind of personal preferences for people so that we would be able to build these solutions that in runtime are able to do that. So one of the studies that for example, the people here in Japan will for different privacy violations across different cultures so that we learn what kind of mobile phone solutions we could build for usable privacy. So these are a couple of the things that we're looking at. Data is like this. And then the data capture tools. So this is, again, one of my favorite photos to show in these talks. The Japanese-American George Takei, who played Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu, is putting an autograph to something in the Star Trek series, which was aired in 1966. This thing, the tricorder. So it's a multifunctional handheld device originating in the sci-fi series that can perform environmental scans, data recording, data analysis, hence the word tricorder, sensing, recording, computing. Well, what can the modern iPhone do? It can sense really well. It's phenomenally good at recording, and it's really, really powerful in computing as well. So I see the mobile phone much like some kind of a sci-fi miracle that we just a couple of decades ago could only dream of. So now this device is so full of different kind of sensors, including programmable sensors that you can just program humans to use. So if you think of the touch screen itself, the touch screen is a sensor that you can program for any kind of borderline magical wizardry. So then we, as well as some of our colleagues in Denmark, so Aware framework was developed in Oulu by one of my colleagues, and then there's this CARP mobile sensing framework. These frameworks help capture a lot of data from this phone, including objective data from sensors and then subjective data such as survey data or any kind of applications you might want to program using the touchscreen data and try to make sense of that data for different kind of medical uses. So we've been doing solutions for elderly care, cancer symptoms, mental disorders, Parkinson's disease. Most of these rely on the concept of just gathering a lot of this data and then building some kind of aggregation mechanism to make sense of that data. It's kind of loosely based on this idea of crowdsourcing. In our minds, we are building new platforms for enabling this kind of mass crowd sensing, which again loosely falls under the concept of crowdsourcing, although maybe not specifically exactly. But still, these platforms are excellent uses for collecting personal data. And for example, sleep and pain are also something that we've been working a lot with, together with this company Oura, which, by the way, originates from Oulu, Finland as well. So there's this wearable sleep sensor that is pretty popular now in the world. And then in addition to these mobile solutions, we're really trying hard always to build something for like real use cases for the end users. So these are more like basic research concepts that only work for a couple of weeks or something like a proof of concept. But then we are also building longer term solutions. And one of our kind of main areas here has been self-care and decision support specifically. So in many places in the world, including Finland and Japan, definitely, population is aging and the healthcare services have a pretty tough time trying to keep up with the demand for all the services. So we are looking into self-care. Now, we're not looking into trying to replace the medical doctors. So we're always trying our best to work together with the medical experts. So for example, in low back pain, we have been working with the local hospital in Oulu. And then with Parkinson's disease, we had a lot of Parkinson's disease organizations in the UK and US who have real connections to actual caregivers, actual Parkinson's disease patients. And we were able to, for example, collect probably one of the world's largest crowdsourced studies on Parkinson's disease self-care. So what do people with Parkinson's disease do other than what their doctors are recommending to them. And then we're trying to build this crowdsourced knowledge base on that and offer decision support for other people suffering from similar conditions. And for example, in the low back pain, there's a funny anecdote that I think is, well, important to share, that we usually like cross-evaluate things. So we gather treatment suggestions from the patient community and the experts themselves. And then we try to cross-evaluate them. So what do the patient think works the best, and what do the medical doctors and physiotherapists think that works the best? And and one of the funniest findings in the low back pain case was that the patient community thought that the best solution, or the sort of fastest and best working solution for treating low back pain would be for the doctors to take them seriously. The doctors didn't quite agree on that. They were thinking that they're taking them quite seriously, but you can easily uncover things like the patient community tries to blame or puts the responsibility of curing them to the expert community, and the expert community does kind of the reverse. So they are saying that the patient should go to the gym and strengthen their muscles rather than rely on us to do the work for them. So there's a lot of this kind of hidden knowledge that you can transition from these two different key groups in these scenarios through deployments and studies like this. The end user interfaces might look quite simple actually. So it's something we might just have like sliders that, okay, I want to find a treatment for me that I can do alone because I'm not a very social person, but it has to be very effective. And then through all the crowdsourced knowledge, our backend just tries to make sense of what kind of solutions might work best for you. Now, for work like this, the traditional crowdsourcing marketplaces that are, again, optimized for those data labeling tasks, they don't really work really well. So there are these kind of higher end platforms like Prolific Online that are much more useful and usable, and of course, much more expensive for this kind of work. But still, if you think of what they enable, so they enable this kind of fantastic pre-screeners, different kind of humans from all walks of life, different levels of education, lots of different buckets of people. It's really worth it. Like, it's basically a programmatic access to all kinds of cognition at scale. And you can even do like a two-step task designs there. So you do like a pre-filtered crowd, and then you put your own questionnaires in front of people, and you only continue with a smaller set of people who are the perfect match for the people that you want to reach with your solutions. So what we have been doing, for example, for the past couple of years is going pretty heavy on mental health issues. Of course, the COVID made everything worse, but this is getting globally worse all the time. And again, there are huge cultural differences again here as well, like what even is a mental health disorder. Like the Asian cultures might look at it very differently than US cultures. Maybe Europe is somewhere in the middle. And then, but nonetheless, we have these kind of issues that probably can be helped with some kind of peer support solutions, AI-based mental health solutions. And in our target group, we have been looking at higher education just because it's pretty convenient, and because we mostly work with university environments anyway. So first of all, it's convenient, but then also it's like a real problem area. So people at that age, they move home. They're at critical age when, suddenly you are faced with a lot of new stress, time management issues, career insecurities these days. There is even like stress induced by these ChatGPTs and everything AI, because when you go to the news, you just read that AI is going to take your job. So imagine starting your school or starting your university education at a stage when all the media is saying that in 5 years from now, nobody will have a job. It's not a really good position. So we're trying to develop different kind of solutions for mental health through these platforms as well. And one of the things that we're looking at, of course, is this conversational AI, because it's just a convenient modality for humans in general. We like to talk, we like to chat. So talking with robots is also an additional avenue to explore here. So some of the things that we have been looking at, for example, is that how does the chatbot personality itself affect or user engagement with these things, or what kind of chatbot should we be developing for people with mental health disorders so that they would be maximally useful in helping them. We also have a bilateral mobility still going on between the University of Tokyo and University of Oulu, where we have been able to send people back and forth to discuss these things and start some papers. Many of them are still ongoing; they haven't been published, but we're looking at this kind of mobile and desktop-based ways to alleviate stress and try to some kind of do mental health self-care. So we're not really going into therapy because, of course, therapy would require a much more heavier involvement from the medical side of things. So we are trying to stick into this kind of, well, human-computer interaction is our field. So we're trying to do a lot of work in HCI basically for these mental health conversational agents. Now, wrapping up some of these things is, again, a thing that I sometimes find myself thinking about is that when we try to, for example, fix issues in these platforms, are we really doing research or are we doing some kind of activism? So we have been doing workshops and some research papers and individual projects as well to look into these platforms themselves and try to improve, for example, their onboarding processes, or imagine how these platforms could operate in more ethical ways. How can they try to improve their worker management? And we've been doing this also together with some of these platforms themselves. So, for example, well, right now with many of these platforms in the current work way to build a completely a platform which is completely independent of these existing big companies. So we're trying to envision this kind of a blockchain-based method also to connect human cognition globally through this kind of visionary papers and just ideas like how could we deploy a blockchain-based internet infrastructure to harvest human cognition at scale to pay directly to people who would be willing to donate their labor for us. So these are some of the wilder ideas that I think that would make sense to explore in the future as well, because there's a real opportunity to, just distribute money directly to workers, for example, in these marginalized countries, and without the danger of some company just magically booting them out from the platform. So there's a lot of good work that can happen through these platforms in the future. So those are some of the ideas that we've been trying to rethink as well, using the same word. So going forward, what we're really trying to figure out is just like there's a real, I don't know if it's a danger or if it's just a natural evolution of things. Like these platforms, many people are voicing out the opinion that they will become fast obsolete because you will just have specialized AI models, even large language models that can do, but the bulk of the tasks that goes into these platforms, these models can just do them better than humans anyway. So what are we going to do with all these humans who already are good at using these platforms and they already know how to kind of donate their bandwidth and their cognition through these platforms? And I think there's a lot of untapped potential there to just look beyond the interface to labor and try to see the humans behind the interface and all the diversity, all the different kind of access to different kinds of thinking globally that we have in these platforms, even to build new platforms to countries where we have untapped potential, untapped cognition, untapped populations of people. So I know, for example, that Microsoft India is working with very, very rural Indian communities through their own crowdsourcing platform, which of course I forget the name of it right now. So there's a platform spin-off company from Microsoft Research India where they are looking at some very, very rural remote villages in India and trying to tap them into this mobile crowdsourcing toolkits, even without internet. So they have this mobile phones connected to the local box that just then syncs whenever it goes online. Basically to do this, to find these networks and pockets of human cognition that we are currently not reaching and getting them paid. So we have so much diversity on the planet that we are not yet using that can be used through the same concept. So those are some of the future ideas that I would be very interested to explore at some point, maybe during the next 10 years. But nonetheless, I think this is pretty much everything that I wanted to say today. So I'm going to finish it here. Thank you.